the agenda? Anyone?
Al, since we were cut off last time, it was not a legitimate meeting. Do we need to go back through the things that were done at the last meeting and redo them? A couple things were voted on, or
No, nothing was just the minutes, I believe, were voted on.
right? But are you allowed to even do that?
Well, we did it before we closed the meeting for
Yeah.
comments.
It wasn't a legitimate meeting to begin with. That's why I bring it up.
I think Dean's right. I think for the sake of being as clean as possible, redoing any votes at the last meeting would be a good idea.
Okay, CJ, what do you think about that?
Well, boards aren't actually required to approve minutes. It's just a courtesy.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to switch a few things around and let's do the intros first. So let's just quickly welcome Tom as our permanent member now, and welcome Dale as alternate. Aaron, welcome, and welcome Joe. I guess you're going to be our liaison. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. We'll make that official on the 20th.
Okay. And I think that goes along with Sandy and myself officially. Does it have to be approved? CJ, yes? Okay.
Yep, that's approved at the organizational meeting on the 19th. Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Also, I'd like to say thank you to both Jerry and Doug for his support throughout the years. I was thinking, CJ, you think we could just send a thank you letter, something in writing to both Jerry and Doug on behalf of the planning board? Would that be something you could put together real quick?
I think it's the least we can do.
Yeah.
We've done more in some cases with people that have left.
Yes, I did reach out to each of them individually on behalf of the department to thank them for their insights and many years of service. But of course, I'm certainly happy to help you prepare and distribute thank you letters.
Okay, maybe we can get together and just do something real quick. I think it's nice to actually put it in writing and send it out as well. Okay, great.
Sure thing.
Okay, next, I guess it's privilege of the floor. CJ, anybody out there?
We do have two folks in the waiting room, but I believe that they are both from Conservation Advisory Council. John and
great.
Terry.
Okay, so let's see, what's next? I guess it's the Bioway then. Is that correct?
The introductions.
Yeah, we did that already.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought. Never mind. Okay, yes, we'll admit them and just a second.
Hi, I guess we have Carrie and John, is it?
Yes.
Greetings.
Do you each want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Carrie Koplinka-Layer, and I co-chair the Conservation Advisory Council. I actually do that with Tom Butler, who you know quite well. And we think we might be joined also by Evan Nogata, who's a brand new CAC member. But he's having some tech issues, so that remains to be seen. And then I'll let John introduce himself.
All right. I'm John Fleming, one of the partners in Walnut Ridge Dairy. And when I saw this project, I was pretty interested in making sure that landowners' views were seen. So I wanted to be involved in this project maybe more than I've been able to commit time to some of the other ones that we've worked on.
Okay, and I guess, do we have a presentation or what's up for tonight?
Yep.
We do.
Yeah, and basically I'm just going to give the overview on what we were asked to do. The Scenic Byway is essentially starts on Route 34 on the southern boundary of the town, goes up to Rogues Harbor, and then follows Route 34 up to the northern border of the town of Lansing. And that's basically a New York State designation of a scenic byway. And so what our council was asked to do was to basically look at what a physical overlay district along that would look like, which was a little difficult because we don't really know what is going to happen within that district. So it was a little interesting to try and figure out how we would want to shape something that we don't know what the ultimate use will be. But the main reason for it is, you know, obviously since it's scenic and a lot of that scenery is agriculture, and then also obviously lake views. So what we wanted to do, we looked at some other municipalities that had done some work like this to kind of figure out how they went about it. So what we decided to do was we had 2 teams of 2 people that drove the entire length of it and stopped every half mile and evaluated what the views were on either side of the road, lakeside and inland or whatever you would call it, and evaluated whether there was really much of a view, and if there was, kind of the distance. Because one of the considerations were, should we have maybe a 500-foot buffer on either side of the road or 1,000-foot. So we brought along rangefinders so that we could really see what those 2 distances really looked like. Personally, you know, initially being a landowner, I'm like, you know, less regulated land is better, but I wanted to be involved myself to kind of see how much that was really going to entail. So we went through that whole process, also looked at spots from our scenic inventory that were along the byway, and so that we could kind of incorporate that into the entire thing. So essentially we then, and hopefully Evan will be able to show us these, but we had Karen Edelstein produce some maps that would show these spots and what the view shed is from each of those spots, and then tied that in with the 500-foot and 1,000-foot increments, so you can see what kind of makes sense there. And so what we had essentially determined was that from the bridge that's currently being repaired northward would be more conducive to 1,000-foot, and south of there would more than likely be a 500-foot, just as our recommendation, just because of the size of the view sheds in those different areas. So that's basically what we've done. If we can get those maps up so that the members of the planning board can see those.
Sure, I'll show those maps, John, and then we can both contribute to explaining them.
Hold on, excuse me, Larry, go ahead, Larry. You have a question?
Would you mind if I addressed a couple of John's comments and put a little background here, including talking about what the planning board has been discussing since the adoption of the comprehensive plan about changes to the agricultural district. Back when the document, the zoning ordinance, was initially written, the planning board was sensitive to the comments of the landowners that you were talking about, John, that wanted less regulation. And that's how we came up with the things that are now allowed in the RA district, which recently, because of the changes in the demographics of the town and because of the changes in the comprehensive plan, Some of the uses have been deemed by a number of people who had input on the comprehensive plan committee, and also others in the town think that they're a little too restrictive. So one of the chores ahead of the planning board is to rewrite that. One of the things that we've been talking about is what was totally RA will become an agricultural district with more restriction on commercial endeavors. And then the same things that are currently allowed in the RA district would be allowed in the hamlets around Lansingville, North Lansing, like that. That's the state of the planning so far, but it includes adding restrictions in the largest general part of the current RA area, changing it to an agricultural district just labeled A, with an idea towards more restraint on commercial activities. That's where we are now. The committee that's working on it is currently reviewing a lot of the items that we've discussed over the past year, and it's a work in progress. So just give you an idea of whether what we're talking about meshes with what you're talking about. Your input is going to be very timely, I think.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Carrie, go ahead.
Great. So I'll share my screen and you can see these maps that John's been referring to. See if that's large. Is that large enough for people to understand what it is, or do you want me to try to?
If you can make it bigger, it'd make it easier to understand.
Okay, let's see. Any clue as to whether where the whole, let's see. Hopefully this will. How about that?
That's
Okay,
much,
so
that's much better. Thank you.
I think you can recognize that this nice map is our beautiful town. And in the northern section, as John mentioned, which is essentially from Salmon Creek North, we found the most expansive views that could be at risk if there were extensive development someday. And so you can see in green there, essentially 34B, that's a buffer of 1,000 feet on either side of the center line of the road. And then from the Salmon Creek and School area south, the remainder of 34B until you get to Rogues Harbor, and then on Lake Shore Drive, that's a buffer of 500 feet. And obviously just a proposal here, and we're hoping that with this presentation, we can get some initial reactions to bring back to the CAC. Here the star is a viewpoint that we identified, and there are a number of these along the route. Some are in the Scenic Resources Inventory that we presented to you last year and that the town board adopted. Others are ones that we subsequently determined were worthy of protection and very beautiful. So you can see in the upper right, that's where that's the overview map, and the white box shows what's enlarged on your screen. And the yellow is what is visible from the town line border to Northern Lake Ridge sign there. That's essentially the view shed, which is what people can see if they are standing there at that point, the viewpoint. And also, if you are in that yellow hatched area, you can see the opposite direction. So it's kind of a two-way street. And Karen designed these with vegetation off. You have choices with software, and that's what we decided just for the purposes of this presentation. So you get a sense of the view shed from this viewpoint in the northern part of our town. Here we are moving further south.
Could I bring
And-
something up?
Sure.
It's getting a little close to home up where you are. And that, obviously is nice. But it does make a difference in terms of how what restrictions get put on that. And so I think that has to be kept in mind. But you certainly do have, things mapped out where people can see and, they're not going 80 miles an hour. They can stop and get run over by somebody going 80 miles an hour. But there's, areas there where people could maybe get off the road and look.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Thanks, Lynn. Carrie, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, great. Again, same codes here, another point on the byway. That's a view near Dutch Harvest Event Center and Algerin Road. Again, without foliage, so the yellow hatching is the view shed. Moving further south, this is an area visible roughly from Lansing Station Road to Sweezy. You can tell the hatching is at the 1,000-foot buffer zone here.
Okay, so
Moving
Carrie, you've got a 1,000-foot zone there. Well, obviously,
Yes.
some of the views go beyond the 1,000 feet.
Yes,
And
they do.
also there's areas within the 1,000 feet that there is no view. So is that 1,000-foot flexible, or is that going to be, how is that going to be adopted? Have you talked
Well,
about that?
That's a good question that we've been wrestling with, because if we have too much variation in the buffer, we felt that it might be very difficult for the planning board to enforce. On the other hand, you make a really good point that, we've been talking about, how do you handle variation when you have an overlay district? So we're bringing it to you folks who are the experts for additional wisdom on that, because we went for, kind of a gradated approach between the north and the south parts of the town. And it's not a perfect model yet, and maybe it will never be. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree that it's a bit of a challenge.
I have a question as well. You mentioned that the views shown were done with the foliage off,
Yes,
but we know that there is foliage, and we know that
Correct.
those views are not necessarily there because the trees are actually blocking part of them, even this time of year when there are no leaves on the trees.
so
Can you
So
comment on that?
yes, I'd be happy to give that a go. Karen actually created 2 sets of maps. We streamlined it for this presentation, but she has created maps with foliage on and with foliage off, just like we did for the Scenic resources inventory, and they do look different. So foliage off, that's a much greater view shed, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think planning board members would like to see both scenarios to make a comparison
Uh-huh.
in the future. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and that would be possible for sure.
I think the next thing you really have to do is you have to come up with a purpose of this zone and what standards you're looking at applying within the zone before you go too much further. Board members, any comments on that?
Yes, I'd like to know what the CAC envisions as restrictions within the buffer, because you have a 500-foot buffer running right through the commercial area of the town.
Mhm.
And that is supposed to be a commercial area, and we are supposed to be able to make that land available to people to create jobs and have businesses and keep people working in this town.
Mhm.
Right.
So
Right, so
we'd like to know what you envision as restrictions or
Right, and so
uses that should be restricted.
the restrictions or limitations or standards, is that going to be uniform throughout the entire length? Or is it going to be different between different sections? As Larry said, there are sections that really should be set aside for some commercial development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Can I ask a
Exactly.
more fundamental question?
Sure.
When you say view shed, does that mean you can stand at that spot and see a long distance? It doesn't necessarily mean you can see across the lake, but you just have a nice, very large visible landscape? Or does it mean you see across the lake?
So just using this Rogues Harbor Inn spot, which everybody knows as an example, has a very limited view shed. And it means that standing at that point, you can see what is in yellow with with foliage and buildings. So for some reason, Karen decided that with foliage and buildings was going to be this particular map, but it's a very limited view shed. Let's contrast that with this point at Blackchin and 34B without foliage, where you can see, more toward the lake. I don't know if I think we're just about out of examples, but in these examples that I've shown, the view shed is only what is in yellow, and you can't necessarily see all the way to the lake unless you get to a place like this, which is just at that intersection of Lansingville Road. And you can see how extensive the view shed is here. It's higher up. No, the view shed does not include views across the lake at all points.
Okay, question about going back to Blackchin.
Mhm.
Again, the areas that you've shown there that are in the view shed, lower on the east side, that's with the foliage off, right?
In general, most of these maps are with the foliage off. Yeah, and we do have some with foliage on. They're just not included right here.
Okay,
And
one thing that we have to remember is that the development there on Blackchin, the development itself has a restriction against cutting that foliage. So that's there, and a lot of it is pine, so that's it's leaved foliage through most of the year.
Mhm.
So you have to bear that in mind too when we're dealing with that. But that is an area that is going to be pretty easy to carry some protection in, because that's all mostly residential down there.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's already heavily restricted
Mhm.
as far as what can go in.
Right.
back to the question of that we never really got a chance to answer. When you're asking us what restrictions are going to be in there, that's what I initially said in my opening statement.
Right.
We don't know that. So that's kind of why we struggled with how big do you make this? How small do you make it? Because we're not the ones, as far as we know, that are going to be even making those recommendations. We were only asked to come up with a physical
Okay.
size.
Oh,
or like,
okay. I guess we didn't realize that. So that's going to be part of the committee that's looking at changing the zoning. Joe, is that correct?
Yep.
That's my understanding. The process has not been fully approved by the town board. It's still in draft form, so it's subject to some changes. But that's my understanding of the current draft that's out.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I think as a planning board, I think we would like to see both the foliage on, foliage off type maps as a comparison. And then I guess we got a few questions. Lynn, what do you have? You have something? Lynn, I can't.
Muted, Lynn.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have the information because we have the natural area inventory as people go forward. There's no hard and fast there. There's no change in what you can and cannot do. And honestly, you know, as I say, it's getting right in my backyard. And personally, I know I have to give up to the scenic byway people who want to drive up the road and be good tourists in the summertime. But, you know, if you can't see it, and a good set of site plan type of buffering, et cetera, and so forth, seems to me more to the point. And distinctly, if you can't see but 300 feet up the hill, maybe that's something that ought to be taken into account. We certainly do it with parcels and land use on edges. And I, you know, think we'll just have to go forward and see what the will of folks are. But it's great to have this, because there are areas that take your breath away, and some are just houses lining the road.
Right.
And so you kind of look and say, well, what are we viewing? So one step at a time, and I don't think there's a problem in this day and age even to customize things a little bit personally.
Yeah. Okay, Sandy, have a question. Sandy next. Joe will get
No,
you.
I just have a comment. So when we're talking about the 1,000-foot buffer, there's some areas that you could actually build a building beyond the 1,000-foot buffer and still block the view shed, even though the land towards the lake, the land contour falls away. That doesn't mean that you can't build a building that's high enough that's going to completely block it after the 1,000-foot buffer.
Mhm. Okay, Joe, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the discussion here is talking about, you know, it sounds like people are thinking that this is about removing all development from this area, and that's not at all what I had envisioned or has been discussed. I think what's being discussed is redirecting the development from just about anything goes to development that would encourage more tourist travel in and out of Ithaca, or in and out of Lansing, excuse me. So we get that Ithaca, you know, going north travel to come up and enjoy this route and encourage businesses that would, you know, accentuate that to move in. And so it's not no businesses, it's a question of which kind of businesses do you want to encourage on this route, and how can they make Lansing more of a destination for people to come and spend their money.
Right, but that's what I think we have to get an idea of the purpose and what kind of standards you're going to apply to it, so then people have an understanding of that.
It's kind of the cart and horse thing. If you want to first have an idea of what kind of spatial you're talking about, and then start talking about what kind of limitations. I think it makes sense to have at least 2, maybe 3 different kinds of design limitations, depending on which part of the road you're talking about, because it runs through very different areas of the town.
Right.
And the one size fits all isn't going to work.
Right, that was our question. Dean, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple things. Lynn talked about there's some places that'll take your breath away. I'm wondering if the committee looked at potential sites for a scenic overlook. I know up near the Methodist Church would certainly be one, and then potentially up on, you know, Lansingville Road up from 34 would be another awesome place as well.
Okay. Deb, did you have a question?
No, just fiddling. Thanks.
Anyone? Tom, next. Go ahead. Tom, we can't.
Can you hear me now?
Barely, Tom.
Oh my goodness. Here we go again.
Try to go off video, Tom, and see if it comes in better.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
No, barely. Okay, well, Tom's working on that. Anyone else? Aaron, do you have any comments or concerns? Aaron?
I'm just taking it in. I'm just listening.
Okay, Larry, you had something?
Yeah, I'm glad everybody's sitting down, because I'm going to almost agree with Joe again. It has never been anticipated by the planning board in any of our discussions that we would have any restriction on any agricultural use in this area, number one. And that includes any commercial use that may directly apply to agricultural production or the sale of agricultural production. The second thing that we're probably going to be dealing with is that low density residential would still be allowed in this area. Now, to go with Joe's encouragement of business, there's one tool that we already have that we could use, and that is commercial development could be allowed in this area through the application of a planned development area, which we've had several of as the years go through. And I think we're pretty good at that. And that sort of thing also runs by the second level of approval, because PDAs have to be approved by the town board.
Okay. Good comment. Tom, are you up?
Can you hear me now?
Not well.
Tom, you sound like you're at the bottom of a deep well, and we can barely hear you, and you're kind of fuzzy at that.
Yeah, I'll just shut up.
Okay.
No.
We kind of
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We kind of cut into your presentation. Did you want to go any further? I mean, I don't think we need to see the whole length of the at this point in time, the length of from north to south. Harry?
It sounds like from what I'm hearing, you'd like to see some similar maps with vegetation on. And then I'm just trying to get a handle on whether your thinking is that we should go more granular, or is generally the overarching plan okay, that it would be a broader buffer to the north, obviously taking into account that we want to be supporting agriculture and agrotourism, and then a narrower buffer to the south. Is that general concept acceptable?
I don't know. I can't say yes or no. Other board members?
I think it makes
Lynn?
sense. Yeah.
I think your 500 feet makes sense. I think there's areas that are built up where you really don't have a whole lot, that, it could be neck down. And distinctly, if you can't see over the hill, that we have, zones where the parcel alongside of the road, so to speak, follows the zoning designation for that area. And we used to do it with a 300-foot border. But I think we're in a position with, as Larry said, site plan or increased site PDAs, or with a more aggressive site plan, and areas that don't exactly take your breath away, that we can be, yes, this is the zone, and it'll come down where there isn't the greatest of scenic, but it'll be how it works out with the group. That just happens to be my opinion.
Larry?
To go along with what Lynn was just saying, one part that comes to mind for me right now is the space from Lansingville Road up to about a half mile north of Beckwith Lane, where that's the lakeside is heavily developed with residential. And then north of Beckwith Lane, there's a rise in the land between the road and the lake that kind of blocks things off, and it's all wooded to the north of that. So if you were considering what Lynn said about necking it down in some spots, that might be the type of area that he's talking about. Am I right?
Yeah, I that's what my comment was, is there going to be flexibility between the depth of that as you go up the road and down the road? Sandy, you had a concern?
No, I'm talking for Tom. He sent in the chat. Carrie, can you say something about the key views?
Oh, I didn't
Oh, sure. Sorry, I didn't see that, Tom.
see it.
Yeah, so addressing some of your comments about these breathtaking views, we did identify, as we knew about some areas, but then when we went out in the twos that John was describing with the rangefinder, we did identify key views that really should be given special consideration, let's say.
Those
So
were
that
the
they're not
points
blocked.
on the map.
Yes, and so the maps that I was just showing, those starred areas, little yellow circles with stars in them, those are the key
Okay.
views. And some of the points that you're actually mentioning are those exact key views. Just to tie that in. Did I miss anything, Tom, that you wanted me to emphasize?
One other thing was going down towards town from Water Wagon Road on down is all somewhat scenic, but it's very narrow.
Very narrow. Yes.
And
Yes.
not an area that should be developed because of the steep hillsides.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see, Dean, you had your hand up?
So yeah, that slope from Salmon Creek to the south to the top of the hill. I mean, obviously there's fantastic views all the way down 34 there. So, you know, that might be an area instead of 500 feet that would be wider to the top of the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I think that's a great
Church
start.
down?
Thank you. Where are we next on this, Joe? What's the, as far as the planning board is concerned?
I'm not sure. We're still working out this whole process, and that's why I'm kind of being hesitant.
Okay.
I think the CAC is going to go back and refine this just a little bit, and hopefully we'll get this other committee up and running. CJ's suggesting, by the end of the month, we could start our meetings and start, putting together some guidelines for what would happen in each of these areas or split them into more areas. And that hasn't been really discussed to the point that I can say. But and the next presentation of the planning board might be the two together. But that's
Okay.
just off the top of my head.
Okay. Tom?
This zone might be a good place to try form-based zoning.
Oh,
The form-based zoning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. There's such there's a diversity throughout most of this corridor. I think it'd be pretty tough to put standards what exactly is the form or the design of that neighborhood, because there currently is such diversity throughout that whole length. But yeah, that's possible. Dean?
I'm just wondering about the maps and other helps. If we can get a tab on the website for maybe the Conservation Advisory Council, where we can start to see these materials online so we can reference them and the public can see them.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
believe the new website that's getting put in is going to be able to do that much more easily than we can now. That's part of the purpose of redoing the websites.
Okay, so we're going to look forward to another set of maps that shows foliage on and foliage off. Anything else, Carrie or John, that you want to present to the board tonight?
No, I think we just wanted an initial look at
Okay.
what we had
Thank
done.
you. All right, board members, any other concerns, questions?
I got one. If you go south from Rogues Harbor, everything there is 500 feet, you're saying, to the town line. There are some areas just past Cuga Landscape, which is in the town of Lansing, that really do take your breath away right now. It's still rural. It's not developed. And so I don't, maybe not one size fits all for that whole route, especially in that the more area that's more rural there. And there's some beautiful areas there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is that
Okay,
That's
so
what I'm
it's-
thinking of.
Hugo Landscape on Triphammer, Dale?
Yes, like the Butler land and some of that area in there is really, and that is in the town of Lansing.
Right.
You're right. And so one of the constraints that we had was just trying to stick to the DOT's description of the scenic byway, which includes 34B and 34, but not Triphammer. And we did make a slight exception. We thought that there were areas of Lake Ridge Road that should be included in the overlay district. As far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why we couldn't go over to Trip Hammer, but I think maybe we would need to bring that to the committee.
Well, this is 34 I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I think this is a good start, staying on the corridor for now. And then let's see how this works out, and then maybe branching out. I mean, there's some great views even up on Jerry Smith Road. There's some fantastic views as you get off of 34. So we'll have to see. All right, I think we can close this out for tonight, and thank Carrie, John, and Evan for their work, and we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
So long, neighbor.
All right. Is CJ, you out there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
everybody.
We're going to go up with the code committee process.
Yes. So one of the things that we've noted in the course of evaluating ideas for either new local laws, be they zoning or other land use regulations, is that the process could be characterized perhaps as somewhat ad hoc. So in an effort to standardize, routinize, but also really develop and think through the process of developing local laws, which of course are then going to be turned into code. I've spoken through this with town council as well as each town board member to try to get a sense from them what they feel would most empower both the town board in their decision making, the committees and boards who provide advice, as well as the robust public engagement I know everyone is committed to. So to that end, I wanted to briefly walk you through something of a kind of a mind meld, but essentially a basic flow chart on how the code revision committee might actually conduct the process of taking an idea, so an issue, right? Be it anything from I don't know, let's say cannabis regulation, just for like a fun recent topic, to say short-term rentals or anything we've really looked at. So if I may, I'll just do a quick screen share here with you. This is an interesting app called Miro that allows you to kind of move things around like at will, which is kind of fun. You know, you don't have to get into too much of a design. You kind of just drag and drop. So starting here, reading to the right, and feel free to chime in anytime, just wave or interrupt. But in essence, we really start here. We start with this initiation. We start with the premise that there's no monopoly on good ideas, that mindful of everyone's right to petition their government, and also mindful of any chilling effect it might have on people to really maybe not understand the process of, well, how does this work? How do you go from, say being interested in a topic like zoning or development or even cannabis or whatever it is, to, having meaningful participation in that process, especially as a board or committee member. Sometimes that can be confusing. And so we start here with this initiation of this idea for a new local law or regulation or policy, really anything. And when it comes to land use, what we're trying to do is, identify the harm we're trying to mitigate with the regulations, right? What's the impact? So from there, we have an introduction to town board. Town board comes across this information somehow, right? They either constituents, a committee member, someone in the public could bring an issue to their attention. And they're also influenced, of course, by regional trends, information at the county level, as well as, a variety of state and federal action. As stuff like Office of Renewable Energy siting just pops up. Cannabis control boards just create themselves at the state level. So it's really helpful for the town board to also kind of understand the context of this. From there, the town board can identify the policy action that's required. So, what are the stakes of action or inaction? I think one of the interesting things to contemplate is, we don't unfortunately have limitless planning and legal and technical resources at the town, much to my chagrin, of course. But what are the states of an action or inaction? To work on one project means that we probably have to look away from another, right? At this point, or does the town board think that there is such a value to examining the issue that perhaps we even bring in outside consultants and we start to really think through and perhaps expand some of our capacity in the town here. But in any event, the Code Revision Committee, we would like to largely make up of town staff. So the folks that are hired to serve you, to prepare high quality first drafts for you to react to. We'd really like that to be fundamentally people who are working with the town's code every day, but have strong representation from the planning board relative to the chair, and same thing from Zoning Board of Appeals, also have that chair involved in the drafting of these quality drafts that the public and boards would react to, and have them think through the scope of what the changes would be as an advisory committee. From there, and it doesn't have to be complicated, it could just be a simple preliminary report or recommendation to the town board. Say, for instance, a committee says, we've noticed issue X. We want to really bring this to your attention. We have a couple bullet points that might be helpful for you. The Code Revision Committee can take that information, turn it into a scope of work, a basic timetable, and formulate some policy directives for the town board to consider, including the robustness of public engagement, right? We've talked about this a little bit. Are we shooting to inform, consult, involve, or go all the way to collaboration? To what extent does the town board want us to engage with the public, and how important is the issue to the public, right? So from there, go ahead.
Sorry, CJ, who are you thinking would be members of the advisory committee?
So in essence, I'm thinking, let me head over to that document. Myself, town planner, John Zipko, code enforcement officer, Scott Russell, attorney for the town, Guy Crow, town board member, Joe Wetmore, and town supervisor, Ed Levine. And I may be missing somebody, so hold on a second. Let me go back to that. As well as the respective chairs of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the chair, of course, of the planning board. I think that's everybody.
Town engineer.
The town engineer is offered to be on the capital improvement committee, but I certainly, any code, yes, that's a great suggestion, and I'm happy to reach out to Dave as well. But I do want to reiterate that the Code Revision Committee is basically just this core bunch that is going to be really working on getting you these high quality deliverables right out of the gate. So that's in essence the liaisons here, and we haven't gotten quite there yet, but this is where our boards and committees are coming in at the point at where we have this high quality preliminary draft. And if I could just kind of one last piece about this, from there, I think it'll be very helpful to have the town board directive on how to proceed. I think that, having them have a really good fundamental, even just basic understanding of really where they want this to head, knowing what the impact on staff work plans will be, what types of resources they have to allocate, either financial or staffing or whatever they may be, to really put that decision making in their hands, and then direct the Code Revision Committee to begin that process in earnest, or direct it to end. There may be reasons we're not privy to, or there may be political reasons, perhaps, why the town board doesn't necessarily want to engage in a given issue. But of course, they are the elected officials, and we serve here at their pleasure. So the Code Revision Committee thus begins work in earnest and prepares this high quality preliminary draft that we've been talking about with updates anytime. And the idea is to take the boards and committees and have a person on the committee liaisoning with the Code Revision Committee as well. So for instance, we have an advisory committee on the power plant future. We have Conservation Advisory Council. We have a broadband committee, right? Those folks, when it makes sense for them to comment on a preliminary draft, right? And again, we go back to the scope of it, right? What if it's perhaps it's a short-term rental local law, let's say, as an example. Conservation Advisory Council may have a limited input on something like that. Whereas, for instance, something like the Scenic Byway, they are really the fundamental building blocks of creating those maps and really thinking about that geographic extent. So you have a whole range, of course, at which boards and committees would be involved. This is also the time to really have public engagement along with the boards and committees. And remember, back here, we've decided what our scope is going to be on that. We've decided, are we simply informing, are we sending out a postcard to certain people? Are we sending a postcard to the whole town? Are we putting up a dedicated website that helps people follow along with a given code change? How robust essentially is the public engagement, which will have been decided here at the beginning of the process. From there, we get a final draft with a summary, a memo saying, this is the conversations we had. The Conservation Advisory Council suggested that we have a 300-foot buffer because in this particular section, because there were concerns about some habitat connectivity, as just a hypothetical example. But say the planning board was concerned about possible impacts to economic development, were we to consider buffers of that magnitude. That's an example of the type of summary discussion that we can provide to town boards so that they understand that the committees may not see everything, exactly the same. I mean, obviously they have different directives. They were created for different reasons, but it gives them a sense of the flavor and the key sticking points that might be there in a final draft, which I imagine there might be. And then we get to this point, right, where the town board really gets to decide. This is their show here, right? They really get to choose, right? They either review and they approve that with amendments. Maybe they send some basic wordsmithing back to the Code Revision Committee, or perhaps they make those amendments themselves based on the feedback that they're getting and public engagement. And then they enact it, and it's codified and added to our process, and baked into our regularly recurring updates, or they terminate it. This is the political legislative process. This is really putting the power in the hands of the town board. So in essence, this is a little bit of a snapshot of what we have envisioned for the flow of future code updates.
Okay.
So CJ, this is a process map, in other words.
Yeah, totally. And were there any questions or points, maybe a sticky note that you all that came to mind while we were going through this?
Tom had a question, CJ, on where does the public fit into the system?
Yes. Okay. So in terms of the public engagement, here at the beginning of the process and the directive from the town board, we have emphasis on their understanding of the robustness of public engagement, right? What is their sense of how important this issue is to the public? like I said, are we talking about just basic public hearing notice? Are we talking about sending postcards to a certain affected properties in a specific zone? Are we talking about a full court press with press releases and dedicated websites, surveys? To what end or what extent are we looking into the public engagement? And I think I think it will be really helpful. And one thing that I found helpful, at least as a consultant, to really define those parameters of public engagement up front, so that no one, feels, well, I wouldn't say no one, because sometimes people are disappointed perhaps that they did not hear about a given law or amendment. But I think the idea here is that we want to have at least a couple significant opportunities for public engagement, and we want the town board to really be clear about what they want at the beginning of that.
CJ,
Yeah.
you spoke about letting the public know what was going on. Is there anything in your mind, for instance, about this process that we're starting right now, to let the public know what we're doing or what the town is planning on doing?
Yeah, and in essence, that's the very first steps of the code revision committee, is to draft these, both an internal way of making these changes, but also understanding what's available to us in terms of getting information out to the public. I can say this, I think, unfortunately, we are a bit hamstrung by the loss of a media outlet such as the Lansing Star, for instance, very beloved in many ways. And that was a really great way to get information out to folks. But that's why we've, the department heads, or many of us, have been encouraging the town board to move to a more robust website with a very, again, robust engagement platform, so that people can actually sign up for things that they're interested in and receive periodic notifications about them. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but yes, that's certainly part of the consideration. Very important.
That does. My second question being, I'm a little thick. I'm a little bit vague on the purpose then of this code review committee, because in the past, and I know that we've got a larger administration now and all that, but in the past, any code review was discussed on the planning board, presented to the town board. Now it seems like we're adding an additional group in that has some of the same people involved and some people who are not the same. Not people that, for instance, the planning board never consulted on any zoning changes or any proposed zoning changes in the past, but it just seems to be adding another level. I may be old fashioned and a little bit confused, but can you speak to the purpose of the planning review committee?
Yes, and I also popped right into the chat there what I is kind of the beginning of envisioning the code revision committee, which has sort of been rolling around in the department for some time. And evidently we used to have something called a codes committee back in the day. I'm not sure the extent of what they did. I couldn't find, I tried to get through the town board resolutions to find when they were created and what their charge was, and I wasn't able to locate anything. But in essence, I think that we really want to, zoning and land use regulations have become increasingly complex, for lack of a better word. And to that end, I think you need a fairly robust technical skill set, which I think is frankly largely unfair to place at the feet of a volunteer board that already gives so much, especially in terms of all the project review and other development review that you're undertaking. And so this is a way to really help formalize and standardize this practice and move it away from an ad hoc venture that essentially gets placed at your feet or kind of whatever committee decides to take up an idea. So that's the idea anyway.
Well, I'm not taking anything away from our professional staff. We also have a certain amount of training in the technicalities of the zoning question. And I just want to make sure that our input, our expertise is not going to be overlooked.
Of
CJ,
course.
what I like about this, it's a system that gets very clear and direct input from the town board immediately, so that when something comes to us, we know what's been done, what's expected, and that, because there are sometimes I feel like we work extremely hard to come up with something and then have no idea where it's going or how it's going to be received.
That's good. I agree with you, Deb. That's correct.
At the same time, to jump in, as Larry says, the back and forth and the planning board's independence is another item. And obviously the town board has the legislative power, but at the same time, we have some independence on our own. And so if it's spam in the can, then obviously there could be some pushback. But I do think having the question clarified is a good one. And we do have interesting input from a small group of people very burned and on fire about something. And then we have a large number of people that are not concerned. And somehow the filtering of that has to be well messaged.
In other words, we have to listen to everybody, not just the squeaky wheel.
I just want to point out that the planning board can also be in that first row of coming up with an idea, saying we really need to work on this from, experiences you're having at some thing that you're looking over. Say, we really need to review this portion of the code. It's not working for us. And in that initial section, you're one of the inputs to say, we really need to go over this. It's not working. And then it goes through this process. So you're not cut out of the loop. You're right there at the beginning as well.
Yeah, I think a good example is the solar law. We spent a lot of time on that as kind of a committee. And as CJ said, it was very ad hoc. And I think that had that gone through this process to begin with, really we spent a lot of time and effort on it. And then we handed it to staff and they went back through and refined it quite a bit. And I think that could have worked a lot smoother if we engaged in a process more like this from the beginning.
Dean, I've also seen the reverse where, something was worked on really hard and then handed to the planning board and then we tore it apart. So I've seen both sides of that.
Any other comments out there?
Yeah, CJ, does the code revision committee, will it meet on a monthly basis or how will it meet on a standard basis like that or when needed?
Yeah, exactly. In essence, I would envision something like our water and sewer committee. It's just a standing committee. It meets the first Wednesday of the month at 11 a.m. And they do review an agenda, advise the town. It would be very, very similar to that or any other advisory committee that the town has.
Okay. Over the past year, we've come up with a number of things that, as the planning board, that we feel need to be addressed? Does this mean we have to go through those notes and present them again to the committee, even though we've already brought them up time and again?
Oh, no, there's, I can screen share with you the whiteboard in my office, which has all like the laundry list of requests from you all, as well as staff who on a fairly regular basis come into the office and say, what is this? So
I hope site plan review is
I think
among the
it's
more prominent items on that.
It certainly is, and I have your list, and we also, I think, are going to be able to hit the ground running and talking about the Ag and RA district, which I know the Planning Board and the Ag Committee both put a considerable amount of work into, which we want to really use as a springboard. But in the future, it would be, I think, more advantageous and perhaps be able to accelerate movement towards some of the town's more significant goals to actually be able to expedite this process, maybe a little beyond what we've done so far. So. In any event, I'll drop a PDF here in the chat, and then you could have this and, look at it, mark it up, say, hey, I don't know about this, or you should really think about adding this. There's nothing is off the table here. I really want to understand what you think can really help this. So.
Well, if it gets some of the things that we've been talking about off the ground, then if I can paraphrase Shakespeare, that "'twere done, 'twere best 'twere done quickly."
I don't know if y'all can print in a big format, but I can't see squat on my screen of what you just put down.
Yeah,
And
it was pretty hard.
Bald head moving into the camera and scaring people, but that's the solar part. But we can, it'd be nice if you did it on a larger format printer.
Yeah, CJ, could you print that up and like on a 14 or even an 18, 17 inch and have it for our members to read?
Absolutely. Yes. And I also just dropped it in the chat as well, but let me just add that here to print.
To be slipping a cannabis, thing in there, we wouldn't even be able to see it.
Any other comments on the flow chart?
Good idea.
Okay, anything else? So CJ, we're okay with that for tonight?
Yeah, this was just meant to be an introduction and get some ideas on what you thought of this process and how we could really accelerate the work that I know that you want done on zoning and other land use regulations, and really get high quality drafts in front of you to review in a timely fashion in coordination with Al. So thank you all, and feel free to call or email or whatever it may be with any questions. We're going to be working remote till the 18th. And to that end, I did just want to mention that we still don't know yet about our public hearings for the end of the month because we don't know the current executive order, or law that suspends the open meetings requirement that meetings be held in person, or, with all the the prior posting of everyone's location. It expires on January 15th. So bear with us, essentially, is what I'm saying. You won't see the public hearing notice for your meeting on the 24th, likely for at least another 4 or 5 days, business days. So just bear with us until we hear what the governor's office is going to do, or our elected officials there in the state.
It took them 6 months to say something the last time.
What's that? I'm sorry, I missed it.
It took them 6 months to say something the last time. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the state government being proactive about making those decisions.
Yeah. All right, next up, planning report.
Let's see, what did I have to share with you? I did want to tell you about the public hearing notices. Oh, that's one thing that I wanted to mention. I did hear the words form-based code in here tonight, and I did want to ask as part of public engagement. I've done this in some other places, but it can also be, I don't know, kind of perilous in a sense, but I was wondering what you guys thought about kind of a crack the code event. This would be as we got further into the zoning code revision process, but one of the fun things to do as part of that is actually to invite architects and engineers to crack your code, to actually try to design the worst project that they can come up with under the code. And so it can be a lot of fun, especially if it's kind of like a charrette, thing. And maybe we can go back to meeting in person. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in forever. But I don't know, that's kind of an idea.
Based on 56 years in construction, that's what architects do best.
Oh my.
Cynic.
What a guy.
Always.
Anything else, CJ, on planning?
And we did, in the interest of time, just if you have any questions about the planning report, please let me know. The new one will be coming out here to you probably Wednesday or Thursday when I send it to town board as well. So if there's any questions, feel free to email me.
Dean has a question.
So CJ, can you update us on the Q4 2021 to Q2 2022 document? On page 1 under the projected milestones, you've got presentation of findings to the planning board and town board on December 13th and 15th. I missed that December 13th meeting, but I did go back and look at the YouTube from both the planning board and the town board, and I didn't see anything that said to me presentation of findings. So can you give us a briefing on findings?
So this is essentially where we're at, is when I started to work through the schedule of adoption. This is when it's really started to occur to me about 6 weeks ago that we needed to formalize this process, or else I didn't see actually being able to meet the deadlines that were set for August to actually get this revision process done. So in essence, I subbed this process in for that.
Okay, so that explains it. Thank you. And what do you have a sense from the town board how quickly we might have a codes committee? Because looking at the timeline, it's pretty essential. Code committee preliminary review, January 4th through the 29th. And then we're supposed to get it here at the beginning of February. So we're already behind the 8 ball for sure.
Well, I would say the code revision committee is going to be part of the organizational resolutions. Those will be part in front of the town board within a matter of days. We're still working through those with the clerks. They're very chunky bunch of writing. Essentially every January, the town reiterates its commitments and, who does what, more or less. And so I anticipate they will be appointed on the 19th. We'll have a meeting shortly thereafter. And one of the first items on the agenda is for everyone to essentially get their head around the current draft, as it were, of the Ag RA work that you have already done, and be able to figure out what needs to be tweaked in that, if anything, and then essentially start turning that around and getting committee feedback so that we can start working on these other pieces, such as site plan review, which is also in chapter 270, major subdivision regulations, some changes to the general provisions, parks and recreation fees for new development, really key, coming up soon. And then, as you saw tonight, we're hoping to also dovetail that with things like the Cuba Lake Scenic Byway Overlay District, which we really need more information on how to really determine that geographic extent. It's kind of the holy grail of rural planning. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
I have 2 questions, CJ. The first is with regard to that draft, the work that we've done on the agricultural zone. Do you have the document that you could forward to us again without having to go back through some of the documents on our website here? Could
Yes,
you
of course.
refer that to us or send us a copy? And
Yeah,
number
and
two,
oh yeah, sure.
I'd like to confirm and have in everybody's mind that at the planning conference, we learned after they fooled around for a couple of years with form-based zoning and found that it could be very, very cumbersome to change a whole zoning ordinance over to a form-based ordinance. It has been, or we had been told, and I would like to confirm with you, that we can, without changing our existing ordinance, we can add form-based tools to use within the ordinance. Now that's all, both from the Planning Federation meeting and from a seminar that Guy held down in Corning on form-based zoning. So I wanted to confirm that we can indeed do that.
Yeah, and I would say
Everybody's
that,
holding it in their mind.
yeah, I would say, form-based code or form-based zoning is really kind of just I would guess, or I would say just kind of a fancy way to say that we can move away from, just really heavily relying on use as the only criteria, right? I think this is kind of I like this way to kind of think about it, right? So you've got, use is just predominate, and of course it makes sense. You wouldn't necessarily want to, in some places have eliminated use entirely, but that may not necessarily be appropriate, for our community, for Lansing. But it really just shifts the balance, right? It asks that form, and when I say form, I mean, we're talking about everything from the massing and scale of buildings to even their materiality, right? What types of materials are required for construction, and they can go from being as basic to as complex as a architectural review board would like to see them be your architectural review committee. So in short, yes.
Well,
yes,
one of the things that we were told, and they referred to traditional zoning in those meetings as Euclidean zoning, where they get that, where Euclid and geometry have anything to do with zoning ordinances, I have no idea.
It's for the town.
That the form-based tools are tools that we've been using recently regarding presentation of the building on the frontage, setting buildings closer to the frontage, moving parking to the side or the back, things like that, that can be tools that we can put within our Euclidean code, but they're form-based tools that we can use. So that's what I'm referring to. And I want to make sure that we're going to be able to do that.
Yes, you can bring the tools that you want. What it is really that has made form easier. It's the advent of graphic standards. It's the ability to turn words into pictures easily, right? So Euclid is named for Euclid, Ohio. So Euclid versus Ambler is a fundamental Supreme Court case that upheld zoning, the right for government to infringe upon private property rights in order to, advance, larger public interest. So that's what I would say. And I think that's one thing that's really cool about the point we're at, and technology even, is that we have the opportunity to, people can really crank out graphics pretty easily now. And so we don't necessarily have to have 400 dense pages of single space text, which is like, whew, we can turn some of it into graphics.
I'm sorry about the Euclid thing. It was my little joke. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
Apparently it was a real little joke.
It was too subtle, Larry. Just too subtle.
Anyway,
CJ, did we come up with an answer as far as the zoning review? Were we going to do it by zoning class? In other words, the RA was going to get the first attention? Or are we
Yes,
going to
that's
do
correct.
it as a whole or by neighborhood? What was the ultimate, what was the decision? Was there one?
My understanding in the directive from the town board, however informally, is that we want to focus on the RA and new ag zoning districts, site plan review. So some of the provisions Larry's been asking for, and some of you as well, to just bring a lot greater clarity to the extent to which the planning board has authority in site plan review, major subdivision regulations, which really involve doing some cleanup there, and then some changes to general provisions, including definitions, which we're going to have to bring in new definitions as part of the RA Ag zoning district update, because it's, I'm hearing things like, value added agricultural enterprises and, commercial enterprises that are geared specifically towards agricultural services, right? So we'll have to get into the nitpickiness of that. But also the parks and recreation fees for new development. It's a pretty small section, but it really needs to go in there because new development needs to be paying their freight for the extensive services that the town offers in parks and recreation. And then also the Cuba Lake Scenic Byway Overlay District. So we're hoping to kind of time these together between the work of the CAC, the work of the Code Revision Committee, and then comments from our boards and committees, and of course, Planning Board being in the forefront of that, to advance kind of all of these at once. And from here on in the future, we're going to be able to suggest prioritization to the town board. We're hoping that out of this code revision process, that the planning board will, as we go on, continue to provide these ideas to us that we then take back and say, okay, yeah, we need to make these changes. We need to make these changes. And we just do that forever and ever. Amen.
The maps also need to be in there someplace before we go through our next comprehensive plan review.
Yeah, and we have some great guidance thanks to the work you all did on the 2018 comprehensive plan, because we do have a future land use map that helps us designate at least the character areas pretty broadly. So of course, yes, the fine grain piece of the zoning map works pretty well, but I believe the county did prepare as part of the work that you had done with Mike, at least some initial mapping by parcel of where the different RA and ag zoning districts would touch down. So we still have that.
CJ, there was some conversation about bringing an outside contractor in to look at some of this. Did that come about, or what?
Yes, it will. Yeah, so I have a couple firms in mind to be able to do some of these graphic enhancements that we've been talking about. I would very much like the Code Revision Committee to get their eyes on this, planner, code enforcement, legal, largely, to kind of help provide some direction there on what types of graphic enhancements would be most valuable. So we'll find out more about that. We'll probably have some decision making on that within the next, I'm guessing, meeting or two.
Okay. Any other questions, board members? Anything you want to bring up tonight on any topic?
I just want to note, CJ, on the meeting schedule. I think July 14th is a Thursday.
Oh, okay.
I was just adding it to my calendar. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This is just a little correction there.
Oh, in your in the new calendar we just came up with? Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, that hasn't gone out to print, I don't think, just yet, in terms of hanging them up around town hall and having those available to applicants. So I'll let Heather know and we can get that corrected. Thank you.
CJ, a quick question regarding the last meeting. Did Guy get back to you on is an agenda an actual document under that scope of that law?
Yeah, so agendas aren't required. I can say that I was able to that evening. I was actually in Florida, so I was able to log on to the town's website, and on the front page did have a direct link to the meeting live, so that folks could jump in if they wanted to. There were several places on the town's website where it was shown. I will say this: I'm apologize to the board for any confusion and also any discomfort you may have felt as part of that. We are getting ready to, we're kind of slowly backing off from our existing website and getting ready to launch a fairly robust board management and meeting management modules, for lack of a better word, that embed and cross-reference within the website. So it will be able to be easier for us to prepare agendas, but then also distribute them as well. So I'm not sure how we managed to miss it on Laserfish, but in any event, don't believe that has any legal.
But I think the way that, hold on, the way the law reads is that a document has to be posted 24 hours in advance. And I think the question is an agenda a document under the scope of the law? I'm sorry, Larry. That was my question.
Yeah, CJ, don't worry a bit about it, because the main reason I suggested that I moved to adjourn the meeting is I felt, and I'm cynical and suspicious. I felt that a trap was being laid for the planning board, and I wanted to get out of there clean.
Yeah, I think all of us felt the same way. That
okay.
It was better just to go ahead and end the meeting, and we'll deal with it next week.
So and thank you for that. That's very kind. And we're hoping to get our process a little more streamlined and modernized for everyone's benefit, board members, the public, applicants, you name it. Guy's advice was, posting of an agenda does not deem the meeting authorized or unauthorized, but they can be posted online and in person in areas of public viewing and buildings. Essentially, they are not required. We are not actually required to post agendas, but we do so, of course, because we want to make sure that we have, basic public engagement and board information. So
before we get confused, his specific wording was the public hearing had not been posted.
Had not been noticed.
So that's absolutely
had not been
false.
published. I know it was false, but I've been in business a while. I can read faces pretty good, and he was very, very disappointed when we ended the meeting. So I think we did the right thing, and this is not an indictment of your staff. I think everything was done the way it should be. I think he was trying to build an untruth.
I just want to point out that you're all live on YouTube.
I don't care. I would say it to him to his face, Joe. You know that about me.
I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Okay, anything else? Board members, anything? All right, I guess motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
thank you very much. Good to see you.